The kitchen was always the heart of our home, and it was there, amidst the scent of my baking and the hum of the refrigerator, that I inadvertently walked into the execution of my marriage. My husband, Daniel, was a successful, highly paid executive, but beneath the tailored suits and the confident facade, he was financially fragile and emotionally dependent on his mother, Joyce. I, Clara, was the steady anchor, the one who quietly managed his impulsive investments and kept our household running. For nearly a year, I had been working in secret on a passion project, an educational application designed to simplify complex financial modeling. It was brilliant, scalable, and entirely mine. The timing was perfect. I was 3 days away from signing a deal that would sell the app for a clean $1 million, a secret I was saving as an anniversary surprise for Daniel, a chance to free us from his career-related anxieties and debt. I was heading to the pantry, my steps muffled by the thick rug, when I heard their voices low, conspiratorial, and laced with venom. "I just don't know how much longer I can maintain this facade, Mom," Daniel said, his voice tight with stress. My heart immediately sank, anticipating a work crisis. But the next words from Joyce were a targeted strike right to the core of my identity. "You don't have to, Daniel. She's ruined you. Look at the debt you're in. That woman has sucked the life out of your ambition and anchored you to her mediocrity. You need to cut her loose, now, before she takes everything you've worked for."
"You should divorce her as soon as possible." The silence from Daniel was not a defense, it was an agreement. My husband sighed, a deep, burdened sound that confirmed his resentment. "I know, Mom. I've been planning it. I haven't figured out the best time to do it. But you're right, she's a liability." The world tilted. The fluorescent kitchen light seemed to buzz in mockery. I didn't step out. I simply stood there, hidden by the doorway, listening to the man who vowed to love me forever, plotting my financial and emotional demise with the woman who had always viewed me as inadequate. The shock was total, immediate, and utterly devastating. The tears didn't come. Instead, a cold, empty vacuum formed in my chest, swallowing the grief and replacing it with a quiet, lethal resolve. The surprise, the $1 million deal, the entire beautiful future I had planned for us vanished in a single, overheard conversation. "I'm Clara. I spent my life believing that loyalty and quiet competence would always protect me. I learned in one brutal moment that betrayal doesn't whisper, it schemes. Before I detail how I turned that betrayal into a strategic advantage, tell me where in the world you are listening to this story from. It helps me remember that even when your whole world collapses, you're not entirely alone." The next 3 days were the most surreal, emotionally exhausting period of my life. I had to live and breathe normally, cooking Daniel's favorite meals, acting concerned about his stress, and smiling at Joyce during her daily visits, all while knowing they saw me as an obstacle to be discarded.
My internal state shifted rapidly. The initial heartbreak gave way to a cold, razor-sharp focus. I was no longer a heartbroken wife. I was a strategist protecting her assets and preparing for war. My first act of self-preservation was the immediate and quiet acceleration of the app deal. I called David, the acquiring company's lawyer, under the pretense of wanting to close faster to surprise Daniel. The truth was, I needed the deal finalized and the paperwork locked down before they could serve me with divorce papers, an attempt to lay claim to the proceeds. David was delighted by my eagerness and agreed to fast-track the final signing and money transfer to the day before our anniversary. The second, more crucial step involved my own finances.
I had a separate professional bank account that Daniel didn't know the exact balance of, where I managed the small profits from my freelance projects, but the bulk of the $1 million would be deposited there. I immediately opened a new, highly shielded corporate shell account, accessible only through two-factor authentication, on a burner phone I purchased that afternoon. The entire $1 million would hit the professional account and be immediately swept into the new, untouchable shell. Daniel, with his shallow understanding of my work and finances, would assume the small, visible accounts were all I had. The third action was the appointment of my own counsel. I called Mrs. Brigham Thorne, a formidable divorce attorney known for her pitbull tenacity. I didn't meet her at her office. I met her in a discreet hotel lobby, miles away from our home.
I laid out the situation plainly: the overheard conspiracy, the pending divorce papers, the $1 million deal closing in 48 hours, and Daniel's reckless financial habits. Mrs. B had a lifted said an official. Thorne was stunned by the level of calculated treachery, but she was thrilled by my foresight. We drafted my own countermotion, secured by the evidence I had already begun gathering. The evidence was key to the final part of my plan. Daniel's executive career, which he and Joyce constantly flaunted, was built entirely on a facade of success. I had always handled the subtle, complex administrative work he overlooked, filing his taxes, paying the property taxes on time, and managing his investment portfolio. Over the last year, however, I had become deeply aware of his company's internal policies, particularly the strict codes of conduct regarding ethics and the use of proprietary company resources. I knew Daniel frequently sent personal, emotionally charged emails to Joyce on his work laptop, often detailing his contempt for his career and his plans for our divorce, a massive violation of his company's severe NDA policy. I also knew that Joyce, relying on Daniel's income, had massive undisclosed debts that Daniel was slowly paying off, debts that were conveniently not reflected in our joint accounts, because I had flagged them as personal liability in my tax filing for him. I compiled everything. Screenshots of his corporate email header showing personal correspondence, evidence of his illegal account transfers to cover Joyce's gambling debts, and my own meticulous record showing I was the one paying 70% of the household liabilities. For 3 days, I moved through the house like a ghost, cold and efficient, preparing the perfect battlefield. Daniel, preoccupied with meeting deadlines at work and preparing his divorce narrative, was blissfully unaware of the financial wire transfer that had just made me a millionaire. He was also unaware that in my final act of wifely duty, I had saved and encrypted every piece of damning evidence he had ever created. He and Joyce saw me as a liability they were about to dispose of. They thought I was weak, emotional, and broke. I was none of those things. I was simply waiting for the clock to strike midnight on our anniversary, the precise moment they planned to humiliate me, to deliver the final devastating surprise. My heart remained fractured, but my resolve was solid. The morning of our anniversary dawned bright and clear, the kind of day that mocked the darkness unfolding within our house.
It was supposed to be a celebration of 12 years of marriage. Instead, it was scheduled to be my execution. Joyce arrived at 6 p.m., uninvited, dressed in an unnervingly festive outfit. She sat on the velvet sofa, her hands folded, eyes glittering with anticipation. She wasn't there for a celebration. She was there for the spectacle. Daniel arrived 30 minutes later, holding a bottle of expensive champagne and a legal envelope. He tried to look mournful, but his relief was palpable. "Happy anniversary, Clara," he said, placing the champagne on the coffee table. He didn't kiss me. He simply handed me the envelope. "I think you need to read this." My breath hitched, not from shock, but from the sudden, powerful convergence of the moment. The divorce papers. Served on our anniversary, in front of his gleeful mother. The ultimate emotional low blow. I took the envelope, my hand perfectly steady. I didn't open it. I just held the thick parchment, letting the weight of his betrayal settle. Joyce immediately leaned forward, delivering the cruel punchline she'd been rehearsing for 3 days. Her face was contorted in a sneer of victory. "You've exploited my son enough, Clara. It's time for you to go back to whatever pathetic life you had before Daniel rescued you. Don't worry, Daniel will be generous enough to cover your first month's rent." Daniel smiled faintly, a confirmation of her condescending assessment of my worth. "I'm sorry it came to this, Clara, but Mom is right. I need a fresh start. You're holding me back." I looked from Daniel to Joyce, then back to the legal envelope in my hand. The coldness inside me was absolute. This was the climax. This was the moment for the explosion.
I put the envelope down on the table, leaned back, and finally, genuinely smiled. "You're right, Joyce," I said, my voice smooth and clear, entirely devoid of the tears they expected. "I have exploited Daniel. For years, I exploited his credit rating to pay off your gambling debts, Joyce. I exploited his inability to budget by paying 70% of the mortgage and his car payments, all so he could maintain the illusion of success. And yes, Daniel, I exploited your negligence by handling all the hard work while you played the CEO role." Their smiles faltered. Joyce's jaw slackened. "But you're wrong about one thing," I continued. reaching into my small clutch bag and pulling out a single pristine sheet of paper, the final signature page from my contract.
I was going to surprise you both today. You see, while you were meticulously planning my downfall over a few $100,000 in savings, I was closing a deal that makes your petty planning entirely irrelevant. I laid the document on the table right next to the divorce papers. Yesterday, I sold my application for $1 million, net profit, and all of it is now securely deposited into an account you will never touch. The silence this time was truly deafening. Joyce's eyes darted from the contract to my face, her mind desperately trying to compute the number. Daniel snatched the paper, his face turning an unhealthy shade of gray as he scanned the signature lines and the acquisition amount. The look of triumph was instantly replaced by a stark, naked terror. He had just voluntarily divorced a millionaire. "What? What is this, Clara?" he stammered, his voice weak. "This is a joint asset. I'm entitled to half." "No, Daniel," I corrected him, my smile widening. "It's not. I began the development process before our marriage and maintained all IP rights in my name. Furthermore, your current divorce filing, which I see here, I tapped the legal envelope, is based on the premise that I am financially dependent and a liability. My lawyer, Miss Mystery Newforce Thorne, who already has a copy of this deal, will argue that this is entirely independent, separate property created and managed without your knowledge or contribution. You just signed away any claim to it." The explosion was spectacular. Joyce lunged forward, grabbing Daniel's arm. "You fool! You incompetent idiot! You just cost us everything. Get her to sign something."
Daniel, realizing the enormity of his mistake, the loss of the entire safety net he had just thrown away, plus the massive legal battle he now faced crumpled, his career was built on the projection of wealth. He had relied on my stable income and financial acumen to mask his deep-seated professional and personal debt. I stood up, preparing the final move. "Actually, Daniel, Miss Thorne advised me to do something else." I pulled out my own small, thin stack of legal documents. I also filed a countersuit this morning. I dropped my own suit onto the table. It wasn't just a divorce filing. It was a motion to compel discovery, detailing the corporate email violations and the evidence of Joyce's debt being funneled through Daniel's firm's resources. "You see, Daniel, your company has a very clear policy against using corporate resources for personal, malicious purposes. My lawyer has sent your managing partner a detailed package this morning, documenting your use of company time and your work computer to plot my discreditation and divorce. She also included documentation regarding the unsecured loans you took to cover Joyce's debts, a massive violation of your firm's ethical code." Daniel looked utterly betrayed, his eyes wide with disbelief. You saved my emails? You kept records? You underestimated me, Daniel. You thought I was just the furniture. You thought I was senile, Joyce. I was just being meticulous. The resolution was swift and absolute. Daniel's managing partners, faced with the ethical nightmare and potential regulatory exposure of an executive using corporate resources to conduct domestic conspiracy and manage illicit personal debts, fired him within 48 hours. His high salary vanished.
Joyce's financial support evaporated, forcing her to confront her own long-ignored debts. I walked away from the marriage, a millionaire, legally untouchable and emotionally free. The house was sold, split amicably, based on my documentation showing I had contributed far more equity than Daniel. I paid off my portion of the mortgage and moved into a new, sunlit apartment overlooking the city. Daniel and Joyce were left with debt, a destroyed reputation, and the sickening knowledge that they had conspired to discard the only person who was actively saving them. Their greed led them to sabotage their own multi-million-dollar future for the cheap thrill of winning a divorce against a wife they wrongly assumed was penniless. And that's when I finally realized that the greatest victory isn't the $1 million, it's the clarity of knowing your self-worth and never letting a petty bully tell you your liability.